Welcome to all. In today's session, we are going to discuss about gender and education. This topic is part of BGSC 001 Gender Sensitization, Society, Culture and Change. And in this video, we are going to discuss about how education acts as a force to empower both women and men. Secondly, initiatives for gender equality in education. Thirdly, barriers to women education. Next point, strategies towards bringing gender equity. And lastly, skill upgradation programs for women. And in this session, the learning outcomes will be to examine how education acts as a force to empower both women and men, to explain the various initiatives for gender equality in education, to discuss the barriers to women education, to discuss the strategies towards bringing gender equity, to classify the skill upgradation programs for women. When we look at gender and education, there comes the importance of education. Education is a human right and a force for sustainable development and peace. Education empowers people with the knowledge, skills and values to live in dignity, build their lives and contribute to their societies. Gender and education, it is a broad category where we can see several thematic strands for enquiry. The themes will be socialization in schools, the social experience of schooling, textbooks, books, curriculum, educational attainment, educators and education workers, higher education and cross-cultural educational practices. And you know that in NEP 2020 also we can see the gender sensitization is becoming more and more important. In this context, we have to look what UNESCO is stating about gender equality. For UNESCO, gender equality refers to the equal rights, responsibilities and opportunities of women and men and girls and boys. It implies that the interests, needs and consideration and priorities of both women and men, they are taken into consideration, recognizing the diversity of different groups of women and men. Gender equality, it is a fundamental human right and necessary precondition for sustainable people-centered development and a goal in and of itself. Next, we are going to discuss what are the initiatives for gender equality in education. And in this, first we are going to discuss about the international initiatives and the major thrust what this international initiative put forth. First one, we can see the World Declaration on Education for All held at Jomtien in 1990. The thrust is upon the gender gap in basic and functional literacy should be eliminated. Secondly, the Beijing Platform for Action adopted in 1995, the thrust is upon to provide universal access to and ensuring the completion of primary education for all girls and boys. And third one, this Beijing Platform for Education 1995, it again stressed upon the education of women would help in improving health, nutrition and health of the family and thereby empower women to participate in decision making in society. The World Education Forum held at Dhaka in 2000, the thrust is upon to eliminate gender disparities in primary and secondary education by 2005 and achieving gender equality in education by 2015 with a focus on ensuring girls full access to and achievement in basic education of good quality. When we look at another international initiative, that is the Millennium Declaration of 2000, where it includes the Millennium Development Goals. It proposes to promote gender equality and empowering women by eliminating gender disparity in primary and secondary education, preferably by 2005, and to all levels of education not later than 2015. And when we look at this Education 2020 agenda, it recognizes gender equality, which requires an approach that ensures that girls and boys, women and men not only gain access to and complete education cycles, but are empowered equally in and through education. Again, we are going to look upon the national initiatives. What the national initiatives are telling about this gender and education. You know that Article 45 of the Directive Principles of State Policy of the Indian Constitution, the state policy, it provide free and that the state should provide free and compulsory education to all children under 14 years of age. And we know that this article principles, the directive principles of state policy, it covers the articles, several articles from 36 to 51, and among it this article 45 is emphasizing that the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children under 14 years of age. And coming to the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009, it made elementary education a fundamental right for all children in the age group of 6 to 14 years. This is stated as per the 86th Constitution Amendment Act via Article 21A. And when we look at the national committees and commissions that stood for women's education, in that case, after independence, the first committee for women's education was National Committee on Women's Education in 1958, and it was chaired by Srimati Durgabhai Deshmukh. And later on, there developed National Council for Women's Education in the year 1959. What is this National Committee on Women's Education stated about women's education? We can quote the women's education thus: the education of girls and women had been sadly neglected in the past, and consequently there was a wide disparity in the education of men and women and boys and girls at all levels and stages of education. And when we come to the committees and commissions, what we can see is that the CSWI, it stands for Committee on the Status of Women in India 1975. This committee examined the constitutional, legal and administrative provisions related to the status of women. It recommended co-education as a long-term policy to promote equality of opportunity. And when we look that before independence or during the beginning of independence or till now, the education of women, it still lacks a lot, or it is lagging behind, because the stereotypical attitude of parents or the society, it affects the education of women. And in this committee, we can see a common course of education for both girls and boys up to 10th standard was entrusted, because when there is a different course of education for both girls and boys, we cannot say that it's a gender equity is maintained in the course. Hence, there should be a common course of education for both girls and boys. Coming to the policy document, what does it mean about women's education? The National Policy on Education, NP 1986, and its Program of Action 1992. It stated a separate chapter is entitled for women's education, and the chapter is titled as Education for Women's Equality, where it states thus, the national education system will play a positive interventionist role in the empowerment of women. It will foster the development of new values through redesigned curricula, textbooks, training and orientation of teachers, decision makers and administrators, and the active involvement of educational institutions. Then we can look at the other initiatives of government in India. First, when we look at the other initiatives, there comes the importance of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA. And in Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, one of the goal is to bridge all gender and social category gaps at primary stage by 2007 and at elementary education level by 2010. The program covers the entire country with special focus on educational needs of girls, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and other children in difficult circumstances. Another attempt we can see by the formation of district primary education program. The thrust is to increase the coverage of girls and improve their academic achievements and reduce gender disparities in respect to enrollment, retention and learning achievements. Normally, after taking enrollment, sometimes we might be satisfied that this much enrollment of girl students are there. But how long they are able to retain and what are their learning achievements? Are we able to assess all these parameters? Next attempt, that is Mahila Samakhya scheme in 1989. The focus is on the centrality of education in empowering women to achieve equality. It is a concrete program for the education and empowerment of women in the rural areas. And the next attempt, that is National Program for Education of Girls at Elementary Level, NPEGEL, in the year 2003. So, in the year 2003, this program is coming up with a thrust on providing additional components for education of underprivileged, disadvantaged girls at the elementary stage. And next initiative that took place in India, that is KGBV, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya. The basic aim of the scheme is to provide a second chance for mainstreaming rural girls belonging to deprived social backgrounds who could not study up to or beyond class 5. The scheme provides residential facilities to girl children for pursuing their upper primary education. The scheme has been implemented in educationally backward blocks where there is a wider gender gap. And the next attempt, that is the condensed courses of education of women. The scheme of condensed courses of education is implemented through the Central Social Welfare Board. The course aims to benefit needy women of tribal, hilly backward areas and urban slums of the age of 15 years who could not join the mainstream education system or dropped out from school. So, there are a lot of dropouts among the women enrollment. What are we going to do for them? For them, this contents course of education is really a help for them. And next we are going to discuss about the barriers to women education. When we look at the barriers, we have to list a lot like mental blocks, parental aspirations and attitudes, poverty, inadequate school facilities, vulnerability of adolescent girls, gender bias in curriculum. Let me see each reasons in detail. First one, mental blocks. When we look at this factor, we can see that the mental setup of the girls itself is affected. Generally, they may wish to take soft courses like humanities, languages, social science, like that. And they may be restricted or they may be not encouraged to take science program, engineering, like that. So, this is the mental setup that is developed among the girl students. So, what is needed is that this is a particular barrier that develop in the minds of women. And more than that, in the beginning of the session, we have discussed about several themes that needs enquiry. In that case, we have discussed about the curriculum. When we look at the curriculum or the textbook that we developed, how do we represent the women folk? We are representing them generally as doing household chores. But is it the way alone? And the pictures may be depicting that the gents are represented, the males are represented in doing finance or in handling the management positions like that. So, this creates some kind of mental restriction in the minds of women. Coming to the second barrier, that is parental aspirations and attitudes. And there is a general tendency among the parents when a child is born and when it is a girl child, they may be thinking about the financial expenses that they have to meet. But instead of sending the girl child for higher education, they may be planning to get them married at an earlier stage. So, the ladies, the female folk, they are burdened with household work so that their potentials are not getting into light, or there is no opportunity to enlarge their potentials. So, this parental attitude also should be changed. Coming to the next factor, that is poverty. You know that in houses where the context of poverty, it marginalized women from getting adequate education. Due to poverty, parents may will to send their male child to school, and the girls may be given the charge of taking care of their siblings, doing household works such that. And coming to the next factor, we can see that the inadequate school facilities. And among the school facilities, the most important thing is that the functional toilets is needed. and better security in schools and better infrastructure should be there in schools so that it attracts the girls to come to school. And the next factor, that is vulnerability of adolescent girls. At the stage of these adolescents, they are undergoing a major change, the bodily changes. So many of them are not feeling secure. They may be willing to reside at home during particular periods. So here what is needed is that the parents and the teachers should act as a scaffold, should provide the adequate scaffold so that the girls may be sent to school or they may feel comfort in attending school. And the next factor, that is the gender bias in curriculum. When we look at gender bias in curriculum, we have discussed how females are represented in curriculum or in textbooks or in the cartoons, how they are represented. When we come to the strategies towards bringing gender equity, we can concentrate upon 4 factors, that are concentration on resources, focus on inhibiting factors, alternative delivery systems and quality improvement. Through these strategies, we can bridge the gender gap that we can see in society or especially in educational sector. Coming to the next discussion, that is the skill upgradation programs for women. There are different programs such as support to training and employment program, which is known as STEP, then Janasichan Sandhan JSS, credit support of RMK, Kishori Shakti Yojana KSY. Let us have a discussion on each of these programs. Janasichan Sandhan, that is the scheme of a JSS, is a multifaceted adult education program aimed at improving the vocational skill and quality of life of the beneficiaries. The objective of JSS is educational, vocational and occupational development of the socio-economically backward and educationally disadvantaged groups of urban rural population, particularly neo-literates, semi-literates, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, women and girls, slum dwellers, migrant workers, etc. Next, support to training and employment program, that is STEP. This program has made a significant impact on women in traditional sectors by upgrading skills and providing employment on a project basis by mobilizing them into viable groups arranging for marketing linkages, support services and access to credit. Coming to the next program, Kishori Shakti Yojana KSY, this scheme caters to the needs of adolescent girls in the age group of 11 to 18 years and addresses the needs of self-development, improving nutrition and health status, literacy and numeric skills, vocational skills, etc. Coming to the next program, credit support of RMK, there we can see the National Credit Fund for Women known as the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh RMK was set up in 1993 to meet the credit needs of the poor and asset-less women in the informal sector. Let me sum up what we have discussed in today's session. Education can empower people and encourage them to contribute to society. There are various initiatives for gender equality in education. The barriers to women education should be removed. Gender equity can be brought through various strategies and there are various skill upgradation programs for women.